Have you ever wondered why you can clearly see that someone is not right for you? Your logic knows it, your friends warn you about it, even your past experiences confirm it. And yet, somehow, you still feel drawn to them, still think about them, still hope they might be different this time. Because if you've ever found yourself emotionally attached to someone who consistently shows you they can't give you what you need, then you've experienced one of the most misunderstood psychological patterns in human behavior. And the truth is, people don't fall for the wrong person because they are weak, naive, or irrational. They fall for the wrong person because their brain is responding to a set of deeply rooted psychological mechanisms that are designed to prioritize emotion, familiarity, and perceived meaning over objective compatibility. And once you understand how these mechanisms work, you begin to realize that attraction is not always aligned with what is actually good for you. And that's where the confusion begins. Because the first thing you need to understand is that the brain is not wired to choose what is healthiest. It is wired to choose what feels emotionally significant, and emotional significance often comes from intensity, unpredictability, and unresolved patterns rather than stability, consistency, and clarity, which means that the very things that make someone wrong for you can also be the things that make them feel more compelling, and one of the strongest forces behind this is emotional intensity. Because when someone creates strong emotional reactions, whether it's excitement, anxiety, longing, or even confusion, your brain interprets that intensity is importance, and importance gets your attention, because the brain is constantly scanning for what feels meaningful, and strong emotions, even uncomfortable ones, signal that something matters, and this is why calm, stable, and predictable connections can sometimes feel boring at first, not because they lack value, but because they don't trigger the same level of emotional activation, and this leads many people to confuse emotional chaos with emotional depth, when in reality, those are very different things. And another powerful mechanism is intermittent reinforcement, where attention, affection, or validation is given inconsistently rather than consistently. Because when someone is sometimes present and sometimes distant, your brain becomes focused on trying to regain those positive moments, creating a loop of anticipation and desire that can feel very similar to addiction. And this is the same principle that makes gambling so engaging, where the unpredictability of the reward increases the urge to keep trying. And in relationships, those rare moments of connection can feel disproportionately meaningful, making you hold on to them even when they are surrounded by negative experiences. And this creates a psychological trap where you are not just attached to the person, but to the possibility of experiencing those highs again. And then there is the role of familiarity, because the brain has a strong preference for what it recognizes, even if what it recognizes is not healthy. And if someone's behavior mirrors patterns you've experienced before, whether from past relationships or early life experiences, it can create a sense of comfort that feels like connection, even if it is actually just repetition. And this is why people often find themselves attracted to similar types of partners again and again, because the brain confuses familiarity with safety and safety with attraction, even when the pattern itself is not beneficial. And then there is the concept of validation, because when someone is emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or difficult to connect with, it can trigger a desire to prove your worth, to earn their attention, or to be the one who changes them. And this turns the relationship into a psychological challenge, where the goal is no longer just connection, but validation. And the more effort you invest into trying to gain that validation, the more your brain interprets that effort as evidence that the person matters, reinforcing your attachment. And this is closely tied to the sunk cost fallacy, where the more time, energy, and emotion you invest into something, the harder it becomes to walk away, because leaving would mean accepting that your investment did not lead to the outcome you hoped for, and that can feel psychologically uncomfortable. So instead, you stay, hoping that things will eventually make sense. And then there is the illusion of potential, which is one of the most deceptive aspects of attraction, because people often fall in love not with who someone consistently is, but with who they could be, or who they were in rare moments. And those glimpses of potential can create a powerful sense of hope, making you focus on what the relationship might become rather than what it actually is. And this hope can keep you emotionally invested far longer than the reality would justify, because you are not just attached to the present, but to a future that hasn't happened. And then there is the role of self-perception, because how you see yourself influences who you are drawn to. And if you have underlying beliefs about needing to earn love, fix problems, or prove your value, you may be more likely to gravitate toward people who activate those patterns because it aligns with your internal narrative, even if it creates external instability. And this is why falling for the wrong person often feels so personal, because it reflects not just the other person's behavior, but your own internal patterns. And then there is the influence of emotional contrast, because the brain experiences changes in emotion more strongly than stable states. So the shift from distance to closeness, from uncertainty to attention, can feel more powerful than consistent affection. And this contrast amplifies the emotional experience, making the connection feel more intense than it actually is. And this intensity can be mistaken for compatibility, when in reality, it is just fluctuation. And then there is the role of timing, because sometimes people meet when one person is ready and the other is not, or when circumstances make consistency difficult. And this mismatch can create a dynamic where one person is always trying to align with the other, leading to imbalance. And that imbalance can increase emotional investment, because the effort required to maintain the connection becomes part of the attachment. And another important factor is scarcity, because when something feels limited or uncertain, it often appears more valuable. So if someone is not fully available, their attention can feel more significant, and this can increase attraction even if the overall experience is not fulfilling. And all of these mechanisms, emotional intensity, intermittent reinforcement, familiarity, validation, potential, self-perception, emotional contrast, timing, and scarcity, work together to create a powerful illusion where the wrong person can feel like the right one, not because they truly are, but because your brain is responding to patterns that amplify attachment. And once you understand this, you begin to see that falling for the wrong person is not a failure of judgment, but a predictable outcome of how human psychology works. And more importantly, you begin to realize that awareness is the first step toward change, because when you can recognize these patterns as they happen, you gain the ability to pause, to question your reactions, and to choose differently, rather than being pulled automatically into the same cycle. And this doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or forcing yourself to feel something different, but it means understanding where those emotions are coming from, so you can respond to them with clarity instead of confusion. And over time, this awareness allows you to shift your focus from what feels intense to what is actually aligned, from what feels familiar to what is genuinely healthy, and from chasing validation to building connection. And that shift changes everything, because instead of asking, "Why do I keep falling for the wrong person?" you start asking, "What patterns am I responding to?" And once you ask that question, you begin to see your experiences in a completely different way, and you realize that the power to change your patterns has always been within you. And if this video helped you understand why attraction can sometimes lead you in the wrong direction and gave you a new perspective on your own experiences, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into human psychology, because once you understand how the mind works, you start to understand yourself, and once you understand yourself, you start to make better choices.